I didn't talk about sending email in the overview slides, but I decided it's a really basic thing that will be very helpful when you're building robots, because if a problem occurs during the robot, it's really cool to be able to send emails to a variety of people so the right people understand that the robot is working or if it had a problem. So in order for this one to work, like I explained in the installation section, you've got to click on Manage Packages and make sure that you have this Mail Activities package installed. This gives us the ability to deal with SMTP, POP, and IMAP emails, along with Exchange and Outlook. The way that we can get to those most easily is simply to go up here to the top left search and type in Mail. And notice that's going to expand all of our possible options under App Integration Mail. Right off the bat, you notice we have SMTP, POP3, Outlook, IMAP, and Exchange. Under SMTP, we're allowed to send a mail message. Under POP3, we can get messages. And under IMAP as well, we can also get mail messages or move messages to a different folder. I'll talk about all these other options in future email lectures, but for now, we're simply going to use this Send SMTP Mail Message activity because it's the easiest for everybody to use. If you're in an enterprise, you might be better off using Send Outlook Mail Message or possibly Send Exchange Mail Message. But again, I'll cover those in future videos. You can explore them now if you want. So I'm going to click on the Start menu. I'll say New Blank Project. I'll name it Sending Email. I'll put it in C, Development UI Path, and I'll call it down here in the description, Sending Email. I click on Create, and the first thing I need to do is grab either a sequence or a flowchart, like we've discussed in the past. I'll click and drag this sequence onto our workflow, and I'll jump back in here and type in Mail, and underneath SMTP, I'll grab Send SMTP Mail Message and drag that in there. If I was doing this for real, I might rename this to something like Notify Robot is Done. Putting a name on it like this might allow us to be able to reuse it in other robots. So if we look at the basic things that the activity requires, it needs to, subject, and body. And notice we can also attach files. This is a little bit misleading though, because if you look up here in the top right, you'll notice we also need our host port and server and our logon, email, and password. That's the user account that's going to be sending the message. We can also specify whether it's an HTML email, and we can determine what kind of secure connection should be used. I'll leave it as auto for now. Under receiver, we also have the ability to BCC or CC somebody. And we have a sender section here where we can specify the email address and the name of the entity sending the email. So usually instead of dealing with these fields out here, I'll go straight over to this side and work my way through these fields accordingly. So if I pull that out and pull this out, we've got a little bit more space to work with. So for me, one of the most important things to talk about is this section here, the host and the logon. Since we're sending an SMTP mail message, there's a certain port number that we need to use. And if I click in here and use this button on the far right, you can see it's expecting an int 32. So it's important to check these things by clicking on these buttons and seeing what type of a value they're expecting. So the server name is going to be a string, and the port is going to be an int 32, which is a number. If you're a business user and you're not familiar with things like SMTP, POP, and IMAP email, be sure to check out the Tech Primer course because I cover that stuff in there. But for now, just know that in order to send SMTP mail messages, we'll be using port 587. You would likely have to ask your IT folks for the name of the SMTP email server, and then you would put that value in here. If you're not working at a company and you have your own email at Gmail, you can probably use something like mail.gmail.com. I have my own private email server, so I'll open a double quote symbol right there, and notice it automatically closes the quotes for me, so I won't have to type that end quote. And I'll type in mail.somevalue.com. I'm going to blur that out so you don't see that. And now I'm going to type in an email address and password that serves as the sender email account. So again, I open my double quotes and it automatically closes the quotes for me. I won't need to type that ending quote. I'm going to blur this out, but I'm typing in a normal email address. And for password, I'm opening my quotes again, and I'll type in my password, and that shows up here in clear text. So obviously typing in our email address and password here in clear text is not the best way to do this. The right way to do this in an enterprise scenario is to store these values in the orchestrator server as credentials. And that will encrypt your email password. And when the robot runs, you'll simply use an activity over here called get credentials, and you'll assign it to a variable in memory. So that way, the only person who will see the email address and password you're using is the IT resource who is helping you administrate the Orchestrator server. So now that I have my email server and port and account, I'm going to jump down here to the sender and receiver. Under receiver, you can put in a semicolon separated list of receivers. And again, this is something you could configure in the Orchestrator server so that you never have to recompile and redeploy the robot when you want to change this. You would simply change a value on the Orchestrator server itself. And that way, the next time the robot runs, it would get the new recipients. In this case, I'm just going to type it in directly. And I'm going to use the same email address down here that I used as the sender above. And for the name property, I'll open my double quotes and I'll just type in a robot. That'll appear in the email client's from field. Now jumping back up here under the email section, for the subject, I'll open my quotes and type in hello from a robot. And in the body field, I'll probably want a little more space. So I'll click on that button there and open this guy up. And this is where you could type in a full message if you wanted to. And here I'll open my double quotes again and type in this message was sent from a robot. And you could put in carriage return line feed characters here to add multiple paragraphs, but I'll cover that in a future lecture. I would recommend putting a timeout on this and also doing some exception handling and potentially retries if this fails. But again, that's more advanced stuff that I'll cover in a future lecture. I'll also talk about attachments later as well. For right now, we're ready to run this robot and see it send an email. So to start the robot, I'll click on this play button on the top left. The robot goes away and comes back. And down here under output, we see that it says sending email execution started and ended. And if I bring up my email client and click on the inbox and hit refresh, you see that a user named A Robot sent us a mail, hello from a robot. And when I click on that, it says this message was sent from a robot. So it's that simple to send emails from your robots. Just make sure that you go over here and type in mail, look for the send SMTP mail message activity, drag it on, configure accordingly, and you're good to go.